Before I start sharing my thoughts on this motorcycle, I would like to mention that this video will not contain specifications of the bike and the top speed test. This will be more of a first ride review of the bike and what I felt about it. Also, please note that since this is my first time doing this kind of content, this will be a voiceover and not a real-time conversation. I like the design of the bike. It could be a subjective choice. As a person who is 180 centimeters tall, I enjoy the tall seat height and I have planted feet on both sides. The seat is really long and wide for the rider and a pillion can comfortably sit on the back. I had my wife as my pillion throughout the ride and she did not feel cramped on the seat and did not feel cramped with the seating position as well. I had more than enough room for moving around in the seat. The seating position is very relaxed, it almost feels like sitting straight on a chair. I don't feel that the foot pegs are suited for good off-roading capability as it slightly leans forward, which means that when you stand up on the bike, your foot has a possibility to slip and you will be leaning over the handlebars. But when you remove the rubber from the foot pegs, you can get a better grip. The ground clearance is more than sufficient for our challenging roads and decent when it comes to off-road. You would require extra lights if you plan to ride at night. Don't get me wrong, it's good, but once you're out of city limits, you're better off with some good aux lights. I personally am not a big fan of killing the kickstart, but I can understand that it's just a personal preference now. For me, the height and position of the handlebars were good. Maybe it could be a tiny bit more high, but I did not feel any pain on my elbows or hand in general. I have never driven the KTM Duke 250, so I can't compare this to that bike. The engine is smooth and decently refined. Initially, I felt that the engine was not that refined, but my friend who lent me the bike told me he hasn't even turned on the bike for 1.5 months. So, once it got going, the engine felt more at ease. The engine does heat in stop and go traffic and the fan tends to kick in a lot in traffic conditions. The heat is not intolerable but definitely on the higher side. Your pillion will also have to wear shoes, otherwise they can feel heat on their legs in heavy traffic. On the correct gear, at lower speeds, there are no vibrations. But at the top end, in each gear, you can feel the bussy vibes on foot pegs. One thing that would be an obstruction in off-roading scenarios would be the torque on this bike. I would like to add a background story to this. When my wife and I went to Meghalaya, we rented a Himalayan which came in extremely handy when we wandered around in Sora on broken large gravel-filled steep roads. In those conditions, the 250 would demand a lot from the rider, even on the first gear, and wouldn't be smooth like the Himalayan. The torque of 24 Newton meters is available only at 7500 rpm, whereas in the Himalayan the torque of 32 Newton meters is available as low as 4000 rpm. I'm not saying that it would be impossible in those scenarios, but you need to be patient enough to feather the clutch and adjust the throttle to get out of such places. I would say that by default the bike is oriented for highway cruising, not even for city. Let me explain why I felt it's not that great in the city. This is attributed to the tall gearing of the bike. Once you're below 18 km per hour, you will have to shift down to first gear. The same phenomenon goes for all gears. You just have to be in the right gear in order to avoid engine knocking and stalling. This was quite contrary to what I've heard in many other reviews. As someone who rides the first model of Gixxer 155, this was completely okay for me in the lower gears. In our single lane roads on sensible and advised speeds, the 6th gear is not much of a requirement. But if you can sustain speeds of 65 km per hour or more, the 6 gears offer smooth sailing. Please don't think that I hate the bike. It's just that a new rider might find it too tiring as you have to work a lot rather than the bike taking care of you on things like gearing. Having said all this, the bike holds a secret, which is attributed to all the points I mentioned before. This bike loves revving and is more or less like a tall, well built street sport bike with some off roading capabilities. The tall gearing allows you to recline on each gear and enjoy the peppy engine, and I would add that it's easy to get lost in this fun. The throttle is not jerky in any sense and is very progressive in nature. The response from the throttle is quite good. You don't feel any kind of manic speed with this bike due to the linear acceleration. As mentioned before, once you're in the right gear, this bike is quite happy and offers a relaxed ride with a fantastic seating posture and relaxed riding position. For people who are 180 and above, this bike would feel like something you have been looking for quite a while as you can relax your legs and the tank cutouts don't obstruct your legs. You feel like you're on a dirt bike with a tall seat, which gives you a clear visibility of the road. At the same time, this could mean wind buffeting in highways. It is possible to adjust the windshield with some tools to adjust the wind blast. The bike is heavy enough for highway riding and at the same time it's easy to maneuver at slow speeds. I did not find it difficult to waddle with two legs as well as pulling out of parking space. If there's something I absolutely hated in this bike, it would be the disappointing mirrors. When I speak about mirrors, I would like to say that the positioning and visibility depends on the rider and their sitting height as well. Throughout the ride, I found myself adjusting the mirrors quite a lot or moving my head to see any vehicles behind me. I loved the front end feel of the bike and it was very communicative and I felt confident going into corners. However, I did not push it that much as the bike was not familiar to me and I did not understand how far I could push it. And I generally don't corner hard when I have a pillion. But it was far better than the Honda CB350 RS which I test drove recently. The well laid out wide handlebars and the communicative front end meant that filtering through traffic was easy and confident. But those super wide handlebars means you can't squeeze so easily in narrow gaps. But I would say that's something you can live with for this level of feedback. While moving after being stationary, the bike never felt heavy, which I did feel in the Himalayan. The suspension is on the stiffer side, especially the rear one. Quite often I felt myself and my pillion jumping around in the seat on bad roads. It is good that the rear suspension is adjustable. One would definitely want a softer suspension on bad roads. But on good roads, this stiff setup will be confidence inspiring in handling the bike. Since it can be easily adjusted on your own, I don't see this as an issue. I did love the braking on this bike, especially the front one, which is still a main issue in the Himalayan when it comes to on-road braking performance. The front brake has a good stopping power and the rear brakes are good too, but are considerably more progressive. ABS intrusion was quite less in hard braking conditions. In broken roads and roads with small crevices and cuts, the bike moves on comfortably unless the potholes are quite deep. I'm happy to say that in broken roads, it's confidence inspiring nonetheless. Even though the seats would be tall for many, it helps that the seat is slender in the front, helping many to have at least one foot planted firmly on the ground. If you ask me whether I would buy this for my personal use, I would definitely say yes. Having said that, it would have been an even sweeter deal if the torque was available at lower RPM and if the gearing was not so tall. I've showered praise for the high seat whenever I could, but KTM should have offered a lower seat height option, keeping in mind the average Indian consumer. The mirrors definitely require replacement, and if you want a shorter gearing, you might want to tinker with the sprockets. Simply put, this is a bike which requires you to learn more about a motorcycle and how to ride it to get the most out of it in different scenarios. I would always advise people to have a long test ride before purchasing any vehicle, as tastes and preferences vary from person to person. And there you have my thoughts on this motorcycle. Hope you found this useful in one way or the other. Thank you for watching and ride safe.